Today I'm going to be talking about hypocritical judgment, and it's found in Matthew 7, verses 1 to 6. And this is probably one of the most misunderstood and misused verses in the Bible, one of the passages that people like to use. First of all, Christians like to use this verse to point out that they don't need to be judged for their sin, that they can do whatever they want, and people have no right to judge them, which is inaccurate. Also, non-Christians like to use this verse or a form of it to say that, well, Christians can't judge them if for by what they do. So we're gonna look at these passages all at once and read the context so that we can get the right meaning, which is what we should always do. But it's especially important for this verse because it's misused very often. A book you could read on this is The Most Misused Verses of the Bible by Eric J. Bargerhoff. That's a good book, as well as John MacArthur's commentary, Matthew 1 to 7. Any of John MacArthur's books are very good, but that one we'll talk about this passage very well. So I recommend those if you'd like further reading. So we're just going to start reading here. Judge not that you be not judged, for with what judgment you judge you will be judged, and with the measure you use it will be measured back to you. And why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank in your own? Or how can you say to your brother, let me remove the speck from your eye, and look, a plank is in your own eye? Hypocrite, first remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Do not give what is holy to the dogs, nor cast your pearls before the swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn and tear you in pieces. Okay, so these verses are talking about judgment, and like I said, people like to misuse them a lot. So first we need to see that in verse 1 it says that judge not that you be not judged. And judge by the Greek word basically means to condemn or to determine. So we are commanded not to condemn or determine, and people seem to take this as that we shouldn't judge people by telling them what they did was wrong or sin, that we shouldn't point out sin, or that we should just go along with it or agree with it. But that's not what it's saying. It's saying we shouldn't condemn or determine, because that's what we're going to receive. That God's the ultimate judge. So we learn from this that all are condemned and that God is supposed to be judging eternity. The point of this verse is to say that we shouldn't be judging somebody's eternal destiny because we can't see the heart. Because even though we can see the outside and we can make reasonable judgments on what people believe and by what they tell us, we shouldn't be saying you're going to hell because we don't know what their heart is. We can say, like, if you don't believe in Jesus Christ and put your faith in him, that you are going to hell because that's a reality. We can't say things like, I don't know, just false judgments, saying that they're assuming that somebody has the wrong heart attitude, gossiping, things like that. We shouldn't be doing that, because God is the one who judges eternity. He knows the hearts. We can't see their hearts, but we can make accurate judgments to an extent, as we'll see in the next couple verses. It doesn't mean that we can't make any judgments. It doesn't mean that we can't discern at all, because other verses in the Bible say that we should test false teachers, and if we couldn't judge, well, then we couldn't discern that. And we are supposed to discern sin in other verses, so it doesn't mean what most people believe it means. And it says in verse 2 that for with what judgment you judge, you will be judged, and then it repeats it as a measure. So we know that the same judgment that we put on other people, we will also be judged by. So we should be willing to be judged ourselves by God, by what we judge other people. So if we're judging people on gossiping, I used that as an example before, we should be willing to be judged by the same standard that we place on people for judging or for gossiping. So we should not be gossiping ourselves, so that we are not being a hypocrite, as we see is the main point here, that it says And why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank in your own eye? So the main point here is hypocrisy, as he points out in verse 5 as well, which we'll get to. The point is that we shouldn't be hypocritically judging. We shouldn't be saying, you're doing that wrong, but yet we're doing it in our own lives. We're doing the exact same thing, or maybe even worse. So in verse 3, one of the key points here is, why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank in your own eye? So basically what these people are doing that Jesus is condemning is the people are pointing out a small sin in somebody else's life, yet they have a huge sin, and most likely the same sin in their own life. And he's saying you shouldn't be pointing out somebody else's sin while you have the same sin or a big sin in your own life that you need to get taken care of first. So he says, why do you do that? The obvious answer is we shouldn't be doing that because it's wrong. He condemns doing that, hypocritically judging. And he says that we should try to remove our own sin before we do that. So he calls out in verse 5, he calls us hypocrites if we're doing that. Because he says, or how can you say to your brother, let me remove the speck from your eye, and look, a plank is in your own eye? It's impossible because we can't see clearly to remove the other person's sin, to exhort them. If we have the same sin or a big sin in our own heart, how can we see clearly to help them do that? We can't. We need to be holy before God before we can help others become holy. Of course, we're not going to be perfect in that, but the point is that we should be seeking that. So he calls us people that do that hypocrites, and he says, first remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. So first we need to get right with God ourselves, and then we can help others get right with God by exhorting them and encouraging them and pointing out their sin in truth, but also love. We need to have both of those. And a lot of times we forget the truth part, we gloss over that, but we also need the love as well, not overemphasizing either of them. So we need to be right with God because that gives us clarity to help others. We see clearly. We are seeing our own sin as well as the sin of others through the lens of the Bible. Through prayer, we can see sin clear, and we see verse 6 can be kind of confusing because it talks about giving what is holy to dogs and pearls to swine. Basically, the point is that we shouldn't be giving our most precious things to dirty animals, is basically what he's saying here. And in real life, it's showing the total depravity, as it is called by theologians, to the people in their natural state are blind to sin. They're blind to God, and they don't want God. They don't understand it. So he's basically saying that these people, all sinners, before they come to Christ, we are all like this, and that we can't understand God, and they're gonna tear us apart, it says. So we're supposed to expect, when we are sharing the gospel, when we're sharing the truth about sin, we're supposed to expect persecution and expect opposition because the world hates the light. There's many verses on that, especially 1 John talks about that a lot. So we should understand that they're going to attack us and that they will not understand what we're saying. So that's basically the point of 6, even though it's a weird wording to us, possibly. So what we should learn from this is that we should oppose false doctrine and sin. Jesus is not saying we should just be pushovers and that we just accept everybody, because that is definitely wrong. That is terrible. If you read your Bible at all, you will not find that. We should be opposing false doctrine. We should be opposing sin, hating sin with a perfect hatred, it says in Psalm. So we should be opposing that. We should also be close with God, and we should do so with holiness and love to judge. That we should be living for God first, and then helping others live for Christ. And also we should learn that we should be not hypocritically judging but having a pure heart for God, and then helping others, because we were once in that same situation, so we can help them come to Christ. So keep in mind that when we are learning about this passage, we shouldn't take a verse out of context, because that can get verses to say what they don't really mean. So we need to take it all in the same context and examine what it truly means, instead of just saying what we think it should mean or what we want it to mean. So that is very important for all passages.